The world didn't stop spinning when I lost everything, but it felt like it should have. My name is Elias Harper, and 3 years ago, I was the man who had it all, until I didn't. Now, standing on the edge of a cliff in Big Sur, I wondered if the ocean below could wash away the shame that clung to me like a second skin. I wasn't always this broken. Once, I was the guy who turned heads in Los Angeles, a 29-year-old talent manager with a penthouse in West Hollywood and a client list that sparkled brighter than the city skyline. My biggest star? Julian Navarro, the 25-year-old heartthrob who'd gone from indie band drummer to Hollywood's golden boy, his face plastered on billboards and his voice crooning through every radio in America. But Julian wasn't just my client. He was my secret, my obsession, and the reason I'd burned my life to the ground. It started innocently enough, or so I told myself. I discovered Julian at a dive bar in Echo Park, his hands flying over the drums, sweat dripping from his brow, his dark eyes catching mine through the haze of cigarette smoke. He was raw, electric, untamed, a talent so undeniable it made my heart race. I signed him that night, promising to make him a star. And I did. Within a year, Julian was headlining sold-out shows, landing movie roles, and charming talk show hosts with that effortless Latino charisma. But behind closed doors, in the quiet moments after the cameras stopped rolling, he was mine. Our first kiss was in the back of a limo after his first Grammy nomination. The city lights blurred past us, and Julian's hand found mine, his fingers trembling. "Elias," he'd whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "You're the only one who sees me." I should have known then that love like ours, born in the shadows of fame, would come at a cost. I managed every detail of Julian's life. His schedule, his diet, his wardrobe, his secrets. I kept him close, too close, blurring the lines between manager and lover. I told myself I was protecting him, shielding him from the vultures of Hollywood. But the truth? I was possessive, addicted to the way he needed me, to the way his eyes searched for me in every crowded room. I built a cage around him, and for a while, he didn't seem to mind. But fame is a hungry beast. Julian's star kept rising, and with it came the pressures: paparazzi, studio execs, fans who wanted pieces of him. I grew paranoid, controlling. I'd snap at him for taking selfies with fans, for laughing too long with a co-star. I'd check his phone, demand to know where he'd been. "I'm not your property, Elias," he'd said once, his voice sharp with hurt. But I couldn't stop. I was terrified of losing him, not just to the world, but to someone else. The cracks started showing in our third year together. Julian was filming a blockbuster in Vancouver, and I was back in LA, drowning in debt. Managing a celebrity isn't cheap. Private jets, five-star hotels, payoffs to keep certain photos out of the tabloids. I'd been reckless, dipping into Julian's earnings to maintain the lifestyle I thought we both deserved. I told myself I'd pay it back, that it was temporary. But the numbers didn't lie. I was bleeding money, and Julian was starting to notice. One night, he called me from set, his voice cold. "Elias, where's the money from my last tour?" "My accountant's asking questions." I lied, said it was tied up in investments, but the truth was eating me alive. I'd gambled away $500,000 on a shady real estate deal, hoping to secure our future. Instead, I lost it all. The shame was unbearable, but worse was the fear that Julian would see me for what I was, a fraud. I started pulling away, avoiding his calls, burying myself in work. But Julian wasn't one to let things go. He showed up at my penthouse unannounced, his eyes blazing. "What's going on with you?" he demanded, slamming the door behind him. He was 26 by then, broader in the shoulders, his jaw sharper, but still with that boyish vulnerability that made my chest ache. I wanted to tell him everything: the debt, the lies, the fear that I wasn't good enough for him. But instead, I pushed him away. "You're suffocating me, Julian." I snapped, the words cutting deeper than I meant. "Maybe you need to figure out who you are without me." His face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought he'd fight back. But he just shook his head and left, the door clicking shut like a gunshot. That was the beginning of the end. A week later, the tabloids got wind of my financial troubles. Someone, maybe a disgruntled assistant, maybe a rival manager, leaked the story. Headlines screamed, "Elias Harper, Hollywood's golden boy manager, bankrupt." The article detailed my mismanagement of Julian's funds, painting me as a predator who'd exploited his trust. The truth was bad enough, but the lies were worse. They said I'd blackmailed Julian, threatened to out him. None of it was true, but in Hollywood, perception is everything. I fled LA in disgrace, leaving behind my clients, my reputation, and the man I loved. I ended up in a small town in Oregon, working odd jobs, living in a rundown apartment that smelled of mildew. I thought I'd hit rock bottom, but I was wrong. Rock bottom came when I saw Julian's face on a magazine cover, his arm around a new manager, his smile brighter than I'd ever seen. He'd moved on. I hadn't. For 2 years, I tried to forget him. I deleted my social media, avoided the news, buried myself in routine. But Julian was everywhere, on TV, on the radio, in the dreams that woke me up sweating in the middle of the night. I'd see his face and remember the way he'd looked at me, like I was his whole world. I hated myself for breaking that trust, for letting my pride and fear destroy us. Then, one rainy afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I found you. We need to talk." Jay, my heart stopped. Julian. After all this time, he'd tracked me down. But why? Was it revenge? Closure? Or something else entirely? I stared at the message, my hands shaking, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. The rain was relentless, drumming against the roof of my tiny apartment in Astoria, Oregon. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching my phone, Julian's text glowing like a warning. "I found you." Those 3 words were a spark in the dark, igniting memories I'd spent 2 years trying to smother. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to delete the message, to keep running from the past. But another part, the part that still dreamed of Julian's laugh, his touch, his voice, couldn't let go. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed again. Finally, I settled on, "Why now?" My thumb hovered over the send button, heart pounding, before I pressed it. His response came within minutes. "Meet me at the Cliffside Inn. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. No explanation, no warmth, just a time and place. The Cliffside Inn was a boutique hotel an hour's drive away, perched on the edge of Big Sur's rugged coastline. It was the kind of place Julian would have loved back when we were together, remote, romantic, a world away from the chaos of Hollywood. But why there? And why me? After everything I'd done. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with possibilities. Was he angry? Did he want to confront me about the money, the lies, the headlines? Or was it something deeper, something that kept me awake with a dangerous flicker of hope? By morning, I was a wreck, but I packed a bag and drove south, the Pacific Ocean stretching out like a mirror of my own uncertainty. The Cliffside Inn was as breathtaking as I'd imagined, all glass and wood, nestled against cliffs that dropped into the churning sea. I arrived early, my stomach in knots, and sat in the lobby, watching the door. At exactly 7 o'clock, Julian walked in. He was 28 now, taller somehow, his black hair longer and messier, his skin kissed by the sun. He wore a white linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, and his eyes, those dark, soulful eyes, locked onto mine the moment he saw me. "Elias," he said, his voice softer than I expected, but with an edge I couldn't place. He crossed the room in a few strides, and before I could stand, he was in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, sandalwood and citrus, the same scent that used to linger on my sheets. Julian, I managed my throat tight. What do you want? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured to the glass doors leading to a terrace overlooking the ocean. Walk with me. We stepped outside, the wind carrying the salt of the sea. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire. Julian stopped at the edge of the terrace, his hands in his pockets, staring out at the horizon. I've spent 2 years trying to hate you, he said finally, his voice low. But I can't. My breath caught. Julian, don't. He cut me off, turning to face me. His eyes were raw, unguarded, and it hit me like a punch how much I'd missed him. You broke me, Elias. You lied. You ran. You left me to deal with the fallout. But I'm here because I need to know why. I wanted to look away, to hide from the pain in his voice, but I couldn't. I was drowning, I admitted, the words spilling out. The debt, the pressure. I thought I could fix it, make it right for us. But I screwed up, Julian. I was too ashamed to face you. He laughed, a bitter sound. Ashamed? You were my everything, Elias. I would have given it all up, the fame, the money, if you'd just been honest. His voice cracked, and I saw the boy I'd met in that dive bar, the one who'd trusted me with his dreams. I didn't know how, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I thought you'd hate me. I did, he said, stepping closer. But not as much as I loved you. The words hung between us, heavy and dangerous. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him close and erase the years of hurt, but I didn't dare. Not yet. Instead, I asked, why did you come after me? After all this time? Julian's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, because I'm not done with you, Elias. Not even close. The next morning, Julian insisted we stay at the Cliffside Inn for the weekend. I didn't argue. How could I, when he looked at me like that, like I was still the man who'd made him a star? We spent the day walking the trails along the coast, the tension between us shifting from anger to something softer, more fragile. He told me about his life since I'd left, the new manager who didn't understand him, the roles he'd taken to stay relevant, the loneliness that fame couldn't fill. I listened, aching with every word, knowing I'd been the one to push him into that world alone. That evening, we sat on the terrace again, sharing a bottle of wine. The air was warm, the stars bright above us. Julian leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. Do you ever think about what we could have been? He asked, his voice quiet. Every day, I said, the honesty raw in my throat. I messed it up, Julian, but I never stopped loving you. He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine. Slowly, he reached for my hand, his fingers warm against my skin. I want to believe you, he said, but I need time. I nodded, my heart pounding. Take all the time you need. The weekend passed in a blur of quiet moments, shared glances, tentative touches, laughter that felt like coming home. But beneath it all was a current of fear. Julian was still a star, his life under a microscope. And I was still the man who'd fallen from grace, the one the tabloids had branded a villain. Could we really rebuild what we'd lost? On our last night, Julian took me to the cliff's edge, where the ocean roared below. He turned to me, his face lit by the moonlight. I'm not promising anything, he said, his voice steady. But I'm willing to try. For us. I took his hand, my heart swelling. That's all I've ever wanted. But the world wasn't done with us. The next morning, as we checked out of the inn, a photographer emerged from nowhere, his camera flashing. Julian, is this your disgraced manager? Are you back together? The questions hit like bullets, and I saw the panic in Julian's eyes. Get in the car, he said, pulling me toward his rental. We sped off, the photographer's shouts fading behind us. But the damage was done. By noon, the photos were online, the headlines screaming, Julian Navarro rekindles romance with shamed ex-manager. Julian's phone buzzed nonstop, his publicist, his agent, his new manager, all demanding answers. He turned it off, his hands shaking. "I can't do this again," he said, his voice breaking. "The lies, the scrutiny. I thought I was ready, but I'm not." I wanted to fight for him, to tell him we could face it together. But the fear in his eyes stopped me. "What do you need?" I asked, dreading the answer. "I need space," he said, looking away. "I need to figure out who I am without all this noise." I drove back to Astoria alone, my heart heavier than ever. Julian's words echoed in my mind. "I'm not done with you." But what did that mean if he couldn't face the world with me? For the next month, I heard nothing. No texts, no calls, just silence. I threw myself into work, trying to rebuild my life. But every night, I checked my phone, hoping. Then, one evening, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a letter in Julian's handwriting and a plane ticket to New York. The letter was short. "I'm ready to stop running. Meet me at the top of the Empire State Building. Midnight, next Friday. J." New York City was a kaleidoscope of lights and noise, a far cry from the quiet cliffs of Big Sur. I stood at the observation deck of the Empire State Building, the wind whipping through my jacket, my heart racing as the clock ticked toward midnight. I didn't know what to expect. Julian could have changed his mind, could have decided I wasn't worth the risk. But I'd come this far, and I wasn't turning back. At 11:59, the elevator doors opened, and there he was. Julian, in a black coat, his hair tousled by the wind, his eyes brighter than the city below. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just walked toward me until we were inches apart. "I thought you needed space," I said, my voice barely audible over the wind. "I did," he said, "but I realized something. Space doesn't fix what's broken. You do." He reached for my hand, his fingers lacing through mine, and in that moment, the world fell away. No cameras, no headlines, just us. "I'm done hiding," he said, his voice firm. "I love you, Elias. I always have, and I don't care what the world thinks." Tears stung my eyes as I pulled him close, our foreheads touching. "I don't deserve you," I whispered. "Maybe not," he said, a smile breaking through. "But you've got me anyway." We stood there, wrapped in each other, the city sprawling beneath us. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There'd be more headlines, more judgment, more battles to fight. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Julian had hunted me down, not with anger or revenge, but with a love that refused to die. And I'd spend the rest of my life proving I was worthy of it. The next morning, Julian posted a photo on his social media, a shot of our hands intertwined against the New York skyline. The caption read, "This is my truth. Love wins." The world exploded with reactions, some cruel, some kind, but we didn't care. We'd found our way back to each other, and that was enough. Years later, we'd build a life together, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet moments. A shared apartment in Brooklyn, late-night talks over coffee, walks through Central Park. I never returned to Hollywood, but I didn't need to. Julian was my home, and I was his. And in the end, that was the greatest story we'd ever tell.